All right, testing, 1, 2, 3. Lord, help me make this video. So we have a special guest today, which is my husband playing video games on the couch while I do this. So we're gonna see how this works. Um, so this is episode 3 of Why God Kills People, and we are up to. We kind of just did the children of Israel last time. And now we're up to, we can really skip over Judges. I couldn't think of any good example in Judges where it's God actually says that he is responsible for those deaths. So we're going to move closer towards the King's era, the King David era, because there's a couple of notable examples there. And there's only a few of these, but as we have seen, it's taken me like an entire hour to talk about like 3 of these. So we'll see how we do today. So let's start with Samuel, 1 Samuel 2:12, which I think this is the one that's about the priest before Samuel that has 2 sons. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So 1 Samuel. So for anybody that doesn't know the story, Samuel was basically the last judge. And the judges were leaders that sort of rose up once Israel made it into the promised land. Moses dies, Joshua becomes the leader. Joshua gets them in there, and they have, a prosperous generation with Joshua, and like all of those leaders that were around at that time. Joshua dies, old and full of years. Everything's wonderful. Well, then another generation comes along that like kind of remembers all of the stuff that happened, and there was some wilderness problems and all that. There was a thing, but they forgot all that. So then God becomes sort of this, I don't know, memory. This has happened like so many times in history. It's kind of funny, like to see how many times God is forgotten, like flat out. And then they come into a situation where he has to be sort of reintroduced to a new generation of Israelites. So that's what happens. They get sort of overran by like the other people groups in the land. There's a whole thing about that. That's kind of interesting where, I don't know, it's kind of like a punishment, but also like something that they need at the same time, where because they had dishonored him in some way, he wasn't able to drive out every single group that was in the land. So they still had enemies that were around them. And every once in a while, they'd get beat up, banged up. Usually around the time they would start to forget God, then these people would start to move in. So that's what was happening. They were starting to get oppressed and whatnot. Then they cried out to the Lord. And the Lord started sending them leaders called judges. So you might have heard of Samson. You might have heard of Gideon. These are judges. There was one woman judge. Shout out to Deborah. I actually just heard like a really interesting sermon about how her leadership, I don't know if it was a sermon, but it was like a TikTok. It was like her leadership sort of reflected the time. Like, yes, she was a leader, but it was because the men were not stepping up at all. And so she had to do that job. But like God gave her that anointing to do that job, which is very interesting when you think about it. Like, when I heard that, I mean, it sounds like duh when you hear it, but like now everything is about like a equal opportunity type thing. Like, oh, women can do this too. Women can do this too. And I think that is where you run into problems. Like that's where you can consider something unlawful, I guess. But like, I think there are moments in history, like my mother comes from a line where they went to a church that really like was like, I don't know, it was like a hub, a central hub. A lot of stuff happened in this church, and the person that was pastoring the church was a woman. and she seemed to be like a really powerful figure. Like, I mean, honestly, like she just looms large in the memory of a lot of people. And I think it's, I think about that example all the time because I'm like, how do we explain her? And you could just say, oh, she's out of order, blah, blah, like, and just dismiss her. But it's like, but if you look at the fruit of what she created, of that church, like, she was like legit. Well, how do you explain that? And I think that there are times where if the men aren't stepping up, God will raise up a woman. So, and I think Deborah's existence is that precedent. Like, you can see that. So, it wouldn't surprise me that there's also a correlation with, everybody forgetting God and like whatever, that there's also needing to be a female judge at some point. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. So Samuel is one of the judges, or basically the last judge, because after Samuel, it goes into a kingdom where the people are like, we're tired of these just having leaders and just having these random things, which low key, I think that, like there's a whole part in there where God says, Samuel's like, don't do this wicked thing. And God says, just let them do it. They're rejecting me. They're not rejecting you. So once they asked for a king. But honestly, they were a free people up until this point. And they like literally asked for, give us a government and a whatever. And Samuel lays it out for him. He's like, listen, if you have a king, he's going to take your freaking resources. He's going to make your men fight for the thing. He's going to do all this stuff. Like, they're like, whatever, we don't want to look like everybody else. We look crazy out here. So everything, they just really wanted to fit in, and they just felt like weirdos. They had literally this thing that everybody thinks that communism is going to give them, or whatever ism is going to give them. They literally had it where they just followed God's principles and they didn't harm each other. The laws were set up like, don't harm each other or else. Like, that was the government. It wasn't just like, I don't know, willy-nilly, whatever people were doing at the time, based on like, I don't know what. I mean, really think back. Like, if there's no such thing as a nation, there's no such thing as there's clans, and yeah, the family tie will get you by for a while, but after a while, it's like, no, don't put your hand on my stuff. I'm going to kill your daughter. Like, who sets what are the laws? What are the laws? And it basically whatever makes the society chafe is what we're going to set the laws at. And when it starts to get too much, we'll like, and then you get around that, like, honestly. So these people lived free, they flourished, they thrived. And then every once in a while they got off track and God had to raise up a judge to lead them. They didn't like that system. They wanted a permanent thing, which I guess ultimately God wanted a permanent thing, because then God becomes the king. I don't know. So we're getting way off base here. So back to the story. Enough context.
Be quiet.
Yeah, be quiet. It's a closed set. we're going live. I'm coming at you live from the couch. So anyways, back to the context, which is Samuel. So this is like your Samuel's origin story, okay? And I'm trying to think, like, too, some judges, not every judge had like the role of a prophet. Samuel was kind of like, he had this kind of like wisdom, prophet, priest combo. Some judges were like Samson, where they were just like battle warrior people, and that's how they led, with just being fierce warrior people. And then some people like Deborah, I think Deborah was like on a wisdom tip too, but she went into battle. Like, and there's like a whole story about it. So yeah, everybody had like a different vibe. Gideon was like reluctant. I don't know. There's quite a few judges. I want to say there's like 40. There's a lot. But there's some that are more notable than others. Anyway, okay, I promise we're going to start the story. So Basically, Samuel is one of the best, one of the good ones. And he starts like as a little boy. I could go into his backstory even more, but we don't. I mean, I've already like rambled too much. So he's a little boy, and the current priest that's in there. Should I get into his backstory? Just know that he's a little boy in the temple. He grows up in the temple. Okay, he has a mom, but the mom has dedicated him to God. He lives in the temple, and Eli is the current priest. Now he's got two sons. One of them's named Phineas. I don't remember the other name. And the sons are a hot mess. And that's who we're going to read about. So 1 Samuel 2:12. He's got two sons. I think they're going to give us the context of how bad they are. But basically, they take from the people come and give their sacrifices. They're like threatening people to get sacrifice meat. They're like sleeping with the girls that work out at the temple on the entrance. Like, it's a mess. They're a mess, and they've been a mess for a long time. But Eli, who's kind of like one of these characters, it's kind of cool to have one of these characters because he's not totally bad. He's not as bad as his sons, but he's like looking the other way. He's an old man. I don't know what his deal is. Sometimes like your love for your children just gets you hemmed up or something. Like that's what it seems like, because he doesn't say anything about it. He reprimands them when he finds out all the stuff that they're doing. Like let me go back a little bit. So here's a verse from chapter 1. Oh no, this is still chapter 2, whatever. It says, Eli, who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them?" Which is an excellent point. Kind of still true today. His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put him to death. Another one of those weird verses, like, what does that mean? Why was it the Lord's will to put him to death? And one of the reasons why it's hard to get an answer about that is because my brain, when I read that, I'm like, well, they were wicked. Who cares? Like, the Lord wanted to put him to death. But in case you're wicked and you want to wonder, if you're wondering if the Lord could possibly ever decide to put you to death, is that a thing still? I think it is. And I don't know. Another thing is like, did his sons not listen because it was the Lord's will for them to not listen? Like, is that what that means? I don't know. And we have a similar thing with Pharaoh and the 10 plagues and how it says, every single time the Lord hardened his heart, so that he would not let the people go, so that he could show the miracles. But one day I had a thought, and I was like, what if that is the Bible's way of explaining, or the author's way of explaining why someone wouldn't obey God's command immediately? Because it's like, how can you not, if God says, let my people go, how can you just say no and live? Like, is that a roundabout way of them explaining how that's even possible? It's like, oh, well, God made it happen for them to not listen. And that's not a cop-out, because eventually he does he does enough stuff that eventually he has to let him go. It's like too much. So it's not a cop-out like, oh, the reason why I'm not winning right now is because the Lord doesn't want me to win. Like, that could actually be a valid explanation. So yeah, I don't know why the Bible gives us a specific insight on them, because that's another thing too, because a lot of times it'll say like he pleaded with them, but they didn't listen, and then that's the end of the sentence. Here it says They didn't listen because it was the Lord's will to put him to death. So it doesn't always let you in on that information when someone decides not to listen or whatever. So that means that's a time to pay attention. Or they just knew it for sure, so they were able to put it there. So, and that's why this makes the list, because this is God specifically handling these people's death. I think part of it is, again, if we look at Genesis, if we look at the reasons why God does things, I think this sort of goes under kind of two categories, because we've got the precedent of uh, Judah's sons just being wicked, and God's like, no. And he takes the sons out, replaces them later with two new sons, which is also important. But we see like the same thing here where there's these two priests that are just wicked and they're working, but they're also in a holy office, which I think also is like a double, it's like a combo thing. So if you're wicked and you want to know how to avoid God just up and killing you because he decides it's too much, try not to do the most wicked thing while doing a holy office for God, maybe. So let me find where it says. So, why did I start at 2:12? Maybe that's just giving me the context of how they were wicked. Maybe that's what my thinking was. Okay, so let's read what they were doing. I said some of it already, but it says Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priests that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest servant would come with a three-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servant would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. If the person said to him, let the fat be burned first and then take whatever you want, the servant would answer, no, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force. Okay. So, and then it gives you a nice little sentence just in case you don't get any of that, which you probably don't. The sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. So, this is a very good example of like what it's like reading the Bible, because it just told you detail by detail what was going on. I bet you're still lost because so much time has passed. This way of life is gone. Like, do you see how details wouldn't help you? Because you're going to have to do some research yourself. The Bible cannot do it all for you. You're going to, if you really want to know what that's about, because even when it says, when they're describing, it was a practice of the priest that whenever blah, 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 it doesn't say that that was the correct practice, or if this is what they just started doing after a while, if they were supposed to do it like this, or if this was just Eli's sons doing this. So you're going to have to like go through and see like and research like, which you could do because it does tell you in Leviticus how to do these, how you're supposed to do these things. So this is a good lesson in like, if you just want to take the Bible's word for it that it's bad, you're just like, and skip the research, you could do that too. That's fine. But if you're like, no, I need to know that this is, then you're going to have to do a lot of research because, it's not the Bible's fault. This is just the way of relics or whatever. Okay. So we're going to take the Bible's word for it today, that the sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, and they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. Okay. So meanwhile, Samuel is a little boy in the temple. And then it says a prophecy against the house of Eli. Now, the prophets weren't really a thing yet until the Kings, I want to say. you could sort of say that Samuel is like the first instance of the prophet with the king, the prophet king combo. There's sort of like a prophet that can speak on behalf of God to the king of Israel and tell him like things that God wants him to know. So there might be like here and there it wasn't like a specific office. I would say like there was prophecy in the camp with Moses. Like I think we inadvertently read some of that. So, but it's kind of interesting to think like prophets weren't like always a thing. Where did they start? When did they pop up? What made it necessary? But we see that there was prophecy in the Israelite camp. So anyway, so a man of God came to Eli. So unnamed prophet. There's a couple of those, which I also think is cool. Unnamed prophet came to Eli and said to him, "This is what the Lord says. Did I not clearly reveal myself to your ancestors' family when they were in Egypt under Pharaoh? I chose your ancestor out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to go up to my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your ancestors' family all the food offerings presented by the Israelites. Why do you scorn my sacrifice and offering that I prescribed for my dwelling? Why do you honor your sons more than me by fattening yourselves on the choice parts of every offering made by my people Israel? Therefore, the Lord of God of Israel declares, I promised that members of your family would minister before me forever. But now the Lord declares, far be it from me. Those who honor me, I will honor. Those who despise me will be disdained. The time is coming when I will cut short your strength and the strength of your priestly house, so that no one in it will reach old age, and you will see distress in my dwelling. Though good will be done in Israel, no one in your family line will ever reach old age. Every one of you that I do not cut off from serving at my altar, I will spare, only to destroy your sight and sap your strength, and all your descendants will die in the prime of life." So that is, oh, wait, let me read the rest of it. So it says, "And what happens to your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be assigned to you. They will both die on the same day. I will raise up for myself a faithful priest who will do according to what is in my heart and mind. I will firmly establish his priestly house, and they will minister before my anointed one always. Then everyone left in your family line will come and bow down before him for a piece of silver and a loaf of bread and plead, appoint me to some priestly office so I can have food to eat." So that's God laying the smackdown on Eli for his sons. So that's kind of interesting because Samuel, who's a boy, seems to be who God is referring to when he says, "I'm going to raise up a new prophet who's going to do." But like you don't really hear Samuel's name being said often. Like it's Elijah, it's spirit of whatever. You don't hear like spirit of Samuel, which I don't know. Is that sad or is it not? Because Samuel was the dude. So so Samuel goes and sort of tells Eli, because Samuel gets called right after that by God to the like literally audibly, where literally God is calling him, and he's like goes and sees if it's Eli, and he's like, "Did you call me?" And Eli's like, "No," and he does that like 2 times, and then the third time Eli goes, "The next time it happens, just say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening,'" which is kind of funny. Like that happened to me when I was little, and that's what my dad told me. That didn't happen though. I just thought he was calling me. Anyways, blah blah blah. Um, so that happens, and then Samuel tells Eli everything that he told Eli is he's going to carry it out. Um, and then it says, because I told him I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about, and his sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. So we're getting more answers the more that God speaks. And also, you can't sleep on when God says, whoever despises me will be despised. Like that he said that, and that still stands. So, what did he say? The those who honor me, I will honor, and those who despise me will be disdained. Like, I mean, he did say that. That's and not in really in reference to anything, so that is still true. Okay, um, so then God tells Samuel that. Then Samuel goes to Eli, who's the current priest, the old priest, and Eli says, "What does he say to you? Don't hide it from me." And he basically makes him swear not to hide anything that God told him. So Samuel told him, like, he must have sensed that he knew it was going to be about him because, oh, that just came to me. So, like, because why would God be talking to him and not Eli? So Eli is already, he's understands what's going on. So, so when Samuel tells them everything, then Eli says, "He is the Lord, let him do what is good in his eyes." So Eli is kind of this, nobody you can, they're characters, but they're not. They're real people. So you can't be like the good character, the bad character. But at the same time, you can see like Eli failed to do certain things. And because of that, he ended up, his sons are dying in the same day and all this. So I literally was about to go on and read the entire story. I guess I have to because they still haven't died yet. So basically what happens is the Philistines come to town. The Philistines come to town. And they steal the Ark of the Covenant. They say the Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them. When the soldiers returned to the camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today?" Before the Philistines, "Let's bring the Ark of the Lord's covenant up from Shiloh, so that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies." So they're losing battles. They're in a hot mess state spiritually. They're like, let's go get our secret charm and bring it up here. We know we're going to defeat somebody with this here. Like, they really think God won't let them. Like, God does not care. The way that God will just let you lose a whole battle, even though he said, like, I'm going to do all this, like, I don't know. I don't even want to get into it, but that there's a story in Joshua that is just hardcore where you're just like, oh my gosh. So they brought the Ark of the Covenant up to the camp, and all Israel raised a great shout, such a great shout that the ground shook. That's another thing about God too, though, because if they're like, let's bring the Ark of the Covenant, even though they're a hot mess, and he's like, you think you're the little Ark of the Covenant? You bringing your Ark of the Covenant is gonna like make me like get you winning a battle? But then they start like raising such a great shout that the ground shook. Then God's like, okay, I'll let you win this one, but y'all are still in trouble. Like, he doesn't do that here, but he does do that. So, hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, "What is all this shouting in the Hebrew camp?" When they learned that the ark of the Lord had come up into the camp, the Philistines were afraid. "A god has come into the camp," they said. "Oh no, nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness. Be strong, Philistines. Be men, or you will be subject to the Hebrews as they have been to you. Be men and fight." So the Philistines fought, and Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent. The slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. So, yeah, no, that didn't happen. The reason why I think that didn't happen in this case, where God changed his mind, is because they were so happy they got the Ark of the Covenant. Well, the Philistines had kind of more reverence for it, and they decided, like, we got to really fight. Like, this is the same God. Like, they had the fear of the Lord. So they knew they had to bring their A game. Israelites were like, we got our secret charm. Let's go. Like they were still out of pocket. They were still technically out of pocket. They just figured they didn't know why they were going to win. They didn't think why they just thought it was going to be an easy whatever. And so the Philistines believed the same things, and they came more correct than Israel's own people. Like that's my own take on that. So the two sons died, and by the way, um, a Benjamite ran from the battle line and went to Shiloh. When he arrived, there was Eli sitting on his chair by the side of the road watching because his heart feared for the ark of God. Not even his sons. He probably knew those jokers were already dead. He feared for the ark of God. When the man entered the town and told what happened, the whole town sent up a cry. Eli heard the outcry and asked, "What is the meaning of this uproar?" The man hurried up to Eli, who was 98 years old and whose eyes had failed so that he could not see. He told Eli, "I have just come from the battle line. I fled from it this very day." Eli asked, "What happened, my son?" So he tells him what happened. And he says, "Also, your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the Ark of the Covenant has been captured." When he mentioned the Ark of God, not the two sons, when he mentioned the Ark of God, Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. He had led Israel 40 years. So I guess he was a judge too, which I do not remember that being part of the story. The daughter-in-law and the wife of Phinehas went into labor when all of this stuff was going on. Like she was just distressed and went into labor. And as she was dying, the woman attending her said, "Don't despair, you have given birth to a son." And she named the boy Ichabod, which means no glory, saying the glory has departed from Israel because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband. She said the glory had departed from Israel, for the ark of God had been captured. So that's actually a pretty dark story or dark time. It wasn't just like him randomly. Like the deaths meant more than just those particular two guys, but that is an example of God saying your two sons are going to die. Now, also thousands and thousands of people died in battle, but he didn't say he was going to kill a bunch of people in battle. The battle happened, and that happened, and war is war, and whatever. So I don't think that technically counts. So there's that one. Okay, so cut to Samuel rises to power. Samuel anoints Saul as the first king. That doesn't work very well. Then he anoints David as the next king. And that goes better. But it's still got a lot of hot mess pieces to it because of David and Samuel, or not Samuel, but David and Saul. I think Samuel dies during Saul's reign. So let's go to 2 Samuel 6. Samuel used to be one of my favorite books, 1st and 2nd Samuel. I used to pick that up and read it all the time. It was like one of those movies that are always on when you just stop and watch it when it's on. I would pick the Bible up and read that. So it's good. But anyway, moving on, we're at 2 Samuel 6. And funny, we're talking about the Ark of the Covenant again. So let's go back to a little context. David was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned 40 years. In Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. Very interesting numbers there. So then, this is one of his first things that he does when he becomes king. So the king and his men marched to Jerusalem Wait, why did I do this? Second Samuel, Second Samuel 6. I'm in 5. All right. So David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Bela in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which there's a really interesting story after the Philistines capture the ark and they have it for a while and it does not do well there. And they're like, we got to get rid of this thing. They were having some problems. And I don't remember what happened after that. But between that story, basically what I just read to you and Samuel and the ark is captured, and this is like 20, 30 years or something. So anyways, cut to David is going to go get it. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which is on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart. And I don't know if Abinadab is a priest, but there's a whole thing about like who needs to be carrying the ark, which I think is technically part of what I'm trying to say here. So I can look that up. I've got down Joshua 3:4. I don't know if that's where it doesn't sound like where it would be. It sounds like it would be in like Leviticus or something, but Joshua 3:4. Keep a distance. Oh, I don't know if that's like the official rule, but let me read it. Okay. So they set the ark of God on a new cart. Uzzah and Ahio were guiding the cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, and cymbals, and something called a sistrum. I don't know what that is. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. Then the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Here's some more context. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. And then a little more context. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, how can the ark of God ever come to me? He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Let me go on a little more. Now King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken six steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. And wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sounds of trumpets. Okay, let's stop there. There's a lot to talk about. So, God strikes him down because the Lord's anger burned against Uzzah. Why? It says because of his irreverent act. Okay, does that still not answer the question for you? I don't blame you for that. Basically, there's a rule that I apparently found in Joshua 3:4. I don't think there's probably more context in this, but just to give you a context, this is God talking, by the way. I guess he was telling them, let me put the full chapter on because that, okay, so God tells them, this is way, way back in the day, before this is them getting they have the Ark of the Covenant, about to go in the Promised Land. He tells Joshua, when you see the Ark of the Covenant and the Levitical priest carrying it, hint, hint, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go since you have never been this way before, but keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits between you and the ark. Do not go near it. So you're not even really supposed to go near it. And that was a long time ago. Maybe they don't remember the rules. Maybe they don't, who knows what's going on. But not only were they carrying it wrong, then Uzzah, reaches out and touches the thing, like to keep it from falling. Oh, he's just trying to do a nice thing. Okay, well, that nice thing got him killed because God's like, don't help me. I don't know what would have happened if he had just let the thing crash. I don't know. I don't think it would have broke it. Like, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe it would have floated. We don't know because that's what happened. So David was angry, which this might be one of the only references I've ever seen to someone being angry with God. Because I don't know, it's something that David can openly do and get away with almost. Like, I don't know. He just had a very open relationship with God and didn't, it wasn't a big deal to say that. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. Has anyone else, like, where it literally says that they were angry with God? Like, off the top of my head, I don't think there has been a time. So, so yeah, he was angry, but then guess what? He was afraid, though. He wasn't like insane. He was just angry because Uzzah was probably a good dude and he hated to lose him. But then it says he was afraid of the Lord that day and he didn't even want to touch the ark at that point. So then they left the ark at some dude's house. Well, guess what? God is like blessing that guy because the ark is there. So he's like, oh, so it's fine. So they're all trying to figure out like how to approach the ark, and it doesn't even really tell you. You have to just sort of glean from it. Like, I don't think any of these people know what they're doing around this ark. I don't think they know what to do. That seems like that's what's going on. Maybe they don't even know like why he suddenly died. Like, just think about like as these things are unfolding, like what that must have been like. He just suddenly died. Did they get why he died right then? Like, did he just like get blown back as soon as he touched it? Like, they knew something was going on with it. So it kind of turned like a happy day into a sad day. And again, I think this like gets right in the feels, right in the discomfort of people when we're dealing with God and like the way that he could be. But to me, again, and this is not me like making excuses for God. I'm just saying, like, this is his personality. And this is like this is the same of any relationship where you might meet a guy, or, a friend or whatever, two dudes, a couple of guys, whatever, and you're all hanging out and he's super cool, but then something sets him off and then he wants to fight everybody or whatever. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? And then you either stop being friends with him because you're like, he's just too unpredictable, or you're like, well, I don't know, something's going on with him. He's just like he's a cool dude. He just, I don't know. He doesn't like when we bring up, whatever. Like, and you making the choice to stay connected with that person, even though you don't understand this other thing about them, like that counts as something. So that just because he's God and you decide to do that doesn't mean you're brainwashed. Just because he's in charge of everything, that's not the same thing as you having a relationship with him. What we need to do is like when you say, well, okay, yeah, he killed that dude. Like, everybody was in a good mood, but the dude got too close to the thing, and it is what it is. Like, you don't forget yourself just because y'all are having a party. Like, you're not following any of the rules. Where's the Levites? Can we get a Levite in here to carry this thing? That's who should be carrying it, not some random dude. And you don't need to be like grabbing it like it's a, cabinet or whatever. So God is like, it's almost like God was comfortable, but it's like, y'all are pushing this thing. Like, yo, you're being too rough with this stuff. This is like my actual presence in this box. Like, you're getting too comfy. Like, I want to celebrate with you, but you're doing too much. Like, Like, it's like God is real. And so, um, yeah, I think there's something to that where we get caught up in the fact that he's God and he's in charge of everything. And we think like anything having to do with like you shouldn't be allowed to forgive God because God, or like see past something because God should be perfect. He should do everything right. And he should do everything you like and everything that you want. And objectively, is he being perfect all the time and we just don't even perceive it because we can't? Yes. That's probably true. But at the same time, if you have free will and he has free will, there's a part of this where it's just like, are we going to keep being friends or not? And you have to decide, yeah, we are. Like, are you going to be freaked out about a thousands millennia old story and be like, oh my gosh, you just killed that dude? Like, everything was cool and you just killed him. Like, he's so unpredictable. Like, and then also, like, is it really worth it to you to like make an enemy out of God? Like, and to just like get your morals all super high up and be like, I can't serve a God who does this. It's like, are you sure that's the decision you want to make? Because the other alternative is like being the God of the universe's enemy. Like, do you even see yourself doing that in any other context? Like, just imagine the most heinous person in charge, the most heinous person in charge of all the universe, or, you know, the president of the United States just being this horrible, corrupt person. And you being like, I'm not paying my taxes to you, sir. You're a bully. And he's sending people out to draw and quarter them for not paying their taxes, like, because that's just the world that you live in. Like, do you really think you would actually do that? Like, are you doing that because nothing is happening to you right now? Like your secret rebellion against God? Like, are you just feel like you don't have to take it seriously because he's not that guy? Like, he's not. If he was that guy that's like super scary and intimidating and like mafia boss, like you wouldn't be sounding off about it. You wouldn't be like, see, that's why, like, you really need to get that sorted out. Like, I'm trying to, like, yes, I'm trying to help you. Let's go through it all and let's read it all and let's see what we're dealing with. But at the same time, like, be honest with yourself. Like, is it really worth proving the point that this God is genocidal and terrible and malicious? Like, if this is your God, if he's the guy that created everything, like, um, what is your strategy? Besides, after you're right, after you get the badge for being right about him, what is your strategy then? Are you going to continue to be on his bad side? What would be the point of that? What do you gain from doing that? Is there another God that's going to bail you out? Like, are you deluding yourself to thinking like that the devil is actually the good guy? And if he was, like, can he really like branch off? Then that means that this God isn't as bad as you're saying. Like, it can't all be true all together. It can't all be true. You can't have a genocidal maniac God that also uh, keeps the evil in the world so long that he just lets evil people do whatever. Like, unless he's evil and he hates good, which also wouldn't make sense because, like, there's got to be something else going on. But anyways, just, food for thought. So yeah, he killed that dude because he was being too handsy with the ark, which tells what, for me, I'm just like, okay, hands off the ark. I think I can do that. I can manage that. Um, I would probably have told somebody like, hey, maybe chill with how you're handling the ark. That's my husband. Um, I don't know. But it's not scaring me off. That's all I know. So I think I got one more from this time period. Uh, Oh, yes. Okay, so this is also very, very mysterious. Another one of these mysterious deaths. This might be one of the most mysterious ones. And it's in multiple places. The one that's got the most context is this one here in First Chronicles. So First Chronicles 21. While we are on the subject of weird things to that God gets upset about, like let's get all in here, man. Let's look at it. Okay, so First Chronicles 21. David counts the fighting men. Okay, so King David, this is like well into the reign. No, I don't know where it's at. Um, so David is counting the fighting men. He's basically taking a census. And there is something about this census that is just so bad. And I think this is in Kings, you don't really get the sense that when it's in First Kings, like you don't really get the sense that uh, anyone else thinks this is bad. It just kind of seems like God is just like, you did this. But in First Chronicles, it does say um, that other humans also knew this was bad. So let me just read you the thing, okay? It even adds like that Satan is involved. Okay, so it says Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the troops, "Go and count the Israelites from Beersheba to Dan. Then report back to me so that I may know how many there are." But Joab replied, "May the Lord multiply his troops 100 times over. My lord the king, are they not all my lord's subjects? Why does my lord want to do this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel?" I don't know. And this is why I like these so called experts and all that. Hold on. All right. So, all right. So then let me just keep reading because I don't remember what I was talking about. The king's word, however, overruled Joab. So Joab left and went throughout Israel and then came back to Jerusalem. Joab reported the number of the fighting men to David. In all Israel, there were 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword, including 470,000 in Judah. But Joab did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering because the king's command was so repulsive to him. I don't know. I can't even really. I've never come across anything. Oh, I think I know what I was talking about. I was about to like talk about the so-called experts because this is the type of stuff we need the so-called experts to go in and find. I don't need you to go tell me that Israel didn't exist. Like that's if I send you off to go find like why is this evil? Why is this command evil? And you're just like Israel didn't even exist. Like that, you're not helping me. You're like there's no way that a story about they like is this is telling me that there was 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword, including 470,000 in Judah, and you're telling me this is not real? Like, can we just? I just need to take a time out again and get on my soapbox about this again because the like go. I will read the first part of Chronicles. I will read the first part of Numbers to you until you cave and admit to me that this is real. You know why? Because it is a torturous amount of begets and whose son was who. A torturous amount of how many numbers of anybody who was in the land. If you can sit in one sitting and withstand all of that information without being like, all right, fine, Israel's real, I believe it, then we can talk. But until then, like you've got this ginormous book, and it's not just stories. It's like forget receipts, forget like the people that have to keep receipts till the end of the year can't even do this. They just hand you like a big bag of just like jumbled up receipts. These receipts in this here Bible are color coded. They got paper clips around them. They got dates on them. They got names assigned to who did what. And you got some doofus 12 doofuses that went to school for 6 years telling me, oh, the stores to these receipts never existed. These are made up. This isn't real. These stores, we can't find them. Well, we can't find the stores, so it's based on the geography of the time. So likely these stores didn't exist. Sir, honestly, with all due respect, quit your job. Either keep looking or quit your job. I'm not going to throw away a perfectly like orderly stack of receipts with highlight pen and names and dates and all types of stuff of goods that we don't even care about anymore. They cared about it. They cared about it a lot. And you're telling me, oh, well, that's made up because we can't find them stores. It's been 5,000 years and we looked all day and nothing. Okay. Forgive me. I'm going to just go with the people with the receipts. And I'm going to go ahead and say that there was a King David who took a census that God didn't want him to take. And he found out that there were 1,100,000 men who can. This is just one of many, like I said, go to Numbers, go to Chronicles, and literally watch your eyeballs melt with all the details in it. Like, shut up. So back to the story. Joab did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering because the king's command was so repulsive to him. This command was also evil in the sight of God, so he punished Israel. So, unfortunately, we're going to have to do the work ourselves to figure out why this ticked God off, because the experts are too busy debunking Israelites. Canaanites apparently were real. Oh, no, the Canaanites were the Israelites. All this ridiculousness. Okay. I want to know why. Give me some context clue of the day of why that would have been so bad. Experts, they can't. I've yet to hear anything. So we're unfortunately in the dark as to why this made God so mad. If I had to guess, I would speculate it has something to do with just using it like a worldly, like, why do you need to know what status Israel is in? Like, it's not even dependent on them, it's dependent on God. Like, so, but then we see later that David sort of almost comes to his senses and he realizes how bad this is. Because um, it says, then David said to God, I have sinned greatly by doing this. Now I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. And I don't know if David is saying this like because it doesn't say that he's punished Israel yet. It says in the sentence that he punished Israel, but it hasn't happened yet. So I don't know if like David realized it like right after he had like a guilty conscience or what. But it says, the Lord said to Gad, David's seer or David's prophet, go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I'm giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you, which might be the first and only time that God was like, go get a switch and gave him an option of what punishment he wants. So Gad went to David and said to him, this is what the Lord says. Take your choice. 3 years of famine, 3 months of being swept away before your enemies with their swords overtaking you, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, days of plagues in the land, with the angel of the Lord ravaging every part of Israel. Now then, decide on how I should answer the one who sent me. Now, I like to sort of go, which one would I have chosen? 3 years of famine sounds terrible. 3 months of being swept away before your enemies with their swords overtaking you. I feel like maybe I would have picked that. Only because that seems like it feels temporary. It doesn't seem like you could die. And it seems like he's had experience with that. So it seems like he could deal with that. But then there's also the 3 days of the plague, 3 days of the sword of the Lord, which seems like, okay, 3 days. It's not 3 years. It's not 3 months. It's 3 days. It might get a little bad, like 3 days. So David picks the 3 days. But his reasoning is, he says, let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great, but do not let me fall into human hands. So he must know something that I don't, because he did not think that the 3 months with his enemies was going to be a good time. So he was just like over that. He's like, no, bro, this is like way into his reign. Like this is like after there's a whole thing with Absalom. It's just a lot of stuff. He's doing a lot of running. Before he became king, he had to do a lot of running. So he's like, so he picks 3 days of plague. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel, and this is one of the most harshest kind of overt punishments that everyone sees coming. Everyone knows what they've done and what's going to happen. And the Lord sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. He's just like burn it all down. I'll start over. I don't care. I'm God. I can do this like forever. He sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But as the angel was doing so, the Lord saw it and relented concerning the disaster, and said to the angel who was destroying the people, enough, withdraw your hand. So God himself was like, okay, stop. And it says, the angel of the Lord was then standing at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with a drawn sword in his hand extended over Jerusalem. Then David and the elders, clothed in sackcloth, fell face down. David said to God, was it not I who ordered the fighting men to be counted? I, the shepherd, have sinned and done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Lord my God, let your hand fall on me and my family, but do not let this plague remain on your people. So then he builds an altar, but really quick, I want to point out, like David has a similar sort of relationship closeness that Moses does, where he feels like he can step in and say something about this. And this is obviously the last one we're going to do today, but when we get to Kings, there's going to be something interesting in there too. Having to do with somebody who is not in fact close with God, but he ended up getting mercy from God. So anyways, David says, just punish me, don't punish Israel. Because he can't conceive of God. Like, could he have said, like, just please stop, I'll be good, I promise? He might have. But, again, this has so much to do with like our own hearts. Like, we're only going to do and say what we have the capacity to do and say. He did not have the capacity in that moment to tell God, like, please just, he was like, I know the punishment. I believe the punishment has to land on somebody. I will take the punishment. My family will take the punishment. Like he doesn't even say like, just give it to me. He's like, this is probably going to have to bleed out into the family. Like this is all like, you can't go past your own thinking. So the angel of the Lord ordered Gad to tell David to go up and build an altar to the Lord. And he went. So David went up in obedience to the word that Gad had spoken in the name of the Lord. Okay, I feel like I'm just now seeing that he's doing what the angel of the Lord told David to do. I thought that was like his own impetus. Like he went and decided to build an altar and try to get this thing like. So David goes to him again, I guess, because it's told a different way in a different part of the book. So he goes and he buys the threshing floor from this guy so he can build an altar to sort of, and the point of the altar is to sort of beseech God to get the plague to stop altogether. So he says, "How much can I have for your altar?" And the guy goes, "Please take it." Like, he wants to give the altar to King David. Like, no, you can have it. And David's like, no, 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 I can't build an altar uh, on something I haven't paid any money for. He's like, I got to pay for it. So they have a little back and forth about that. He's like, I can't sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. So, this is like really something that sticks out about David. He really understands sacrifice and what they mean to God and all of that. Like there's a story about him and his fighting men, and like he's like, it's like at the end of, I think it's at the end of this, or maybe Second Chronicles, but it's like when we're just getting into the exploits of David, and like apparently they're in a battle, and he says that he's thirsty. He's like, I'm thirsty, and like three of his like coolest, awesome, baddest fighting men go and like slaughter a bunch of like Philistines or whatever to go to this well to get this water for him, and then they bring it to him, and then he I don't know, they didn't tell him that they were going to do that. So when he brings in the water, he instantly knows what they had to do to get that water, and he pours it out before God. But he pours it out before God like, I can't like I can't drink water that y'all like almost died to get, like while we're all fighting, like whatever. So it's this thing where he like, it's a humility thing, but it's also like, because it was like worth so much, he knew that to pour it out as a drink offering, which is a thing. A drink offering is a thing. And so he's big on this. He understands this thing with God. It doesn't make it any easier. Like he obviously, God favors him and stuff. Obviously, like he gets established like as part of the dynasty of forever and stuff. So God honors him, but like it doesn't get him out of stuff like this. Whatever he did, whatever this thing is that he did, that was bad enough that he sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem for 3 days with plague. I have no idea what this could possibly be. So if there was a theme with this one, let me just finish it up here. Basically, he gets the altar, he builds the altar, he puts the offerings on it. He called on the Lord, and the Lord answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offering. Then the Lord spoke to the angel, and he put his sword back into its sheath. At that time, when David saw that the Lord had answered him on the threshing floor, he offered sacrifices there. The tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses had made in the wilderness, and the altar of burnt offering were at the time on the high place at Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God, because he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. So, okay, so it goes on to the next chapter, which I think later it tells you like basically the plague stopped at that point, like once he gave offerings. But and yeah, I'm not the best. Like I'd have to like read up on like how the offerings are supposed to function, and like was it a normal thing for God to answer the burnt offerings right away with fire and all that stuff, if that was like a normal thing or not. But anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. But so basically, if we were to look at the themes of this particular part, because we've got some corporate things happening because of the error of one man, seemingly harmless error. Like, what was the error? And is it about, because you did this, I'm going to do that? Like, the first one was Eli's sons. They were evil. They got taken out. The second thing was more of a ceremonial situation where someone tried to touch the Ark of the Covenant to help it, but still, there were rules set in place for these things. And so there was, there's sort of a similar thing with the census where there was a rule broken there too. A really bad one that no one can remember or give us the context for. Um, and you would say, well, this is unreasonable. Like, God is just like killing people for doing like harmless things. Um, Maybe, but again, there's stuff to be learned from it. Like, because every single time he does it, except for this time, everyone seemed to understand why they were getting punished on this one. But everyone is told why it happens. Maybe not in the moment, like, but everyone is told what happens, and they're like, I don't know. It's this really weird thing where if you really want to dig deep into it, it's hard because none of this applies anymore in a literal sense. But obviously, God doesn't change. He tells us that He doesn't change. So you want to go, well, what? How can we avoid this in the future? Like, what is going on? What happens? And it's mysterious on top of it. So you can't really. You're like, well, what? How do we not? How do we make sure that the plague doesn't come? Like, what do we do? And there's like no information. There's like no information about like why a sense is bad. Like, and it's like one of the worst punishments of all. It's like, oh my God, how do we not do the census thing? Like, don't take a census. Nobody, like, whatever you do, for God's sake, don't take the census. Like, God's going to freak out. And what does that mean? Is that an invitation for you to uh, sort of ask God your own personal questions? Or do you just kind of stay in the dark? Like, do you even really want to know that bad? Or are you just like, I'm sure like God would tell me before I do something crazy like that, like that like offends him. Like, what is the protocol? And I think it's a mixture of all those things. Like I feel like as I'm talking about it, I kind of feel God laughing at me, like, because he's like, that is kind of funny actually. If you're trying to avoid it forever and you're just like, he's just like thinking about people panicking and not knowing how to stop. It's like that. What's that part in? It's like Ocean's 11 or something where he's like coaching him on how to go in and like do the bomb stuff, and he's like, like whatever you do, absolutely positively do not. And then someone like calls him out of the room. And he's like, hold on, I'll be back. And then he never tells them what not to do, positively not to do. So, yeah, it's kind of like that. It's a little bit funny, which makes me think like, whatever it was, this is not something we need to worry about anymore. But I think if you do want to find out about it, he will tell you. And here's the thing, like, because there's no resources on it, there's no possible, if you get an answer, there's your proof right there that God is real and talks to you. Like, because we got nothing. We don't know what was wrong with this census. So if you want to like go and do a deep dive on some of this stuff, you're going to come out better than like every expert that exists right now. And that's when you know these experts are trash, because like they're not going into this stuff that's just sitting here that's like, well, wait, why did that happen? And the thing is, like, going to school and learning from other doofuses who don't know anything cannot make you an expert in this. Having a personal relationship with God is the only thing that's going to make you an expert in this stuff. So the more you can hear, the more faith that you have that you can get an answer, the more that you actually spend time drawing near and trying to get into this stuff, is how you get answers. So no, the experts are the only people that experts are fooling are other morons who don't know anything. They're not fooling me. Like, I know what you have to do to get this information, and it's not go to school for a bunch of years, and having a degree be your only incentive to even look into this stuff. If you have an incentive that comes from here, like on your own, uh, that's you don't need a degree. What do you need a degree for? Like, but that for a lot of people, those are the only types of people who spend time in this word, spend an hour talking about it. Is people who need it for their accolades. So yeah, you just got to be one of those people that want to do it on your own and get good at doing that, and then you'll be just as knowledgeable as anyone else, if not more so. So anyway, yeah, I think that I feel like I should end this with like a like what was the vibe with all of these. It was a lot of it. The majority of it was really surrounded by uh, how to deal with things that God has considered holy, like these sort of consecrated things. We got two guys, yeah, they were wicked, but they were in the temple with that wickedness. They ended up getting like, not only did they die, but their descendants got cut off from the whole thing. And they're never gonna have lived to have uh, live at a long age, or all of this stuff, which is probably still in effect. I mean, somewhere, I'm sure. So that seemed kind of like a harsh punishment. Then we've got someone who, they didn't get cut off, they didn't whatever, but they lost their life, which seemed like a harsh punishment for trying to keep something from falling. Then we got the census thing, which is like one of the most harshest punishments for the actions of one man that God actually favored. He's like one of the most favored favors that God's ever favored. And he got his butt whipped for doing this thing. Maybe because he knew better, or he should have known better. People were trying to warn him and he still did it. It says that Satan incited him to do that. We don't know. We don't know. But this is one of those, like I was talking about Sodom and Gomorrah the other day. Like, you have questions about it for 30 years and you just feel like you'll never get an answer. This one is still on the shelf. I still don't have an answer to this one, or an insight into it at all. So I still got nothing on this one. Maybe in another 5 years, we'll see. Because I now, like, as I was saying before, I trust that eventually it's just gonna pop in my head. It's gonna be so easy. It's another thing too. When it pops in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I never saw that. Watch that weird face that I just made be the thumbnail, dude. Did you see that other thumbnail from the last video? It's ridiculous. So anyway, we're done with David. And then the next one I have is just various kings. And then there should be one more after that, which is just going to be the New Testament. Yes, there is some people dropping like flies in the New Testament. It does happen. And, one of them is Revelation. I don't know if that counts. That's, the future. But that should be the last thing. And then, so what are we, three? So we got one more Old Testament. That would be four. And then the last one will be New Testament. And then we'll be done talking about it. But I don't know. Hopefully we're gleaning. Hopefully we're just, going through the whole Bible and examining these things and trying to get some insight. And I don't know. I feel like I did pretty good, but these in particular are exceptionally mysterious. I think just because it has to do with um, the holiness of God and less about like a particular person's actions, or maybe a combination. I don't know. It's more than just flat out, these people did wrong, these people did bad, these people is more than just infarctions. Like, I don't know. I don't know. Well, anyway, I'm done for today. And yeah.